Computer. Okay. We are live here on the Orange Hammer podcast with none other than Mr. Tony Pagano. Tony, how are you doing this morning? Happy
All
Sunday.
right. I'm psyched to be on the Orange Hammer podcast. Finally.
I think you legitimately might be the number one fan of the show.
I am the number one fan of the show.
Yeah.
Of all of your viewers, I'm probably the one who's known you the longest, except for your mother and father.
I think that might be also accurate. So, and let's just jump in. Obviously, we got to thank my parents for even the connection here.
Absolutely.
So when did you meet them?
So this goes way back, and it's I have to even think about this, but it's got to be the early 90s. It's got to be the early 90s, probably 91, 90, 91. And first off, I want to say, let me just shout out to your mom and dad, who are my most favorite close family friends, whom I love dearly. I love dearly. Your dad is an absolute goddamn rock star, who's taught me so much in my career. So I'm coming up on 40 years in business now, in the world of big building, in New York City and the globe for that matter. And of course, your mom, an incredibly talented designer. And, through those years, we've grown into a real love fest. And it's, I've learned an awful lot from the both of them and continue to learn an awful lot from the both of them. Not necessarily in the industry side, in life. And that's what this is all about as you get older. So 40 years ago, I was a much younger man, right? So, as you move on in years, your friendships, those that are still around, become more and more important to you. And
they're harder to make as you get older too. So
100%.
you cherish them. I mean, I'm 32, so it's relatively young by comparison, but I still am feeling that lesson even now. The list of friends from college dwindles every year. The amount of just, happy birthday texts that come in, it's a little bit less every year, but you cherish those like 4 or 5 buddies that time goes by and you still remain in contact like it was yesterday. So
and you begin to reminisce
yeah
as you get older.
Yeah.
And we do. So going back, I mean, I met the infamous John Stork on a project that I was called into back then for a law firm, Morrison and Foster, 1290 6th Avenue. I kind of remember this clearly. And there was a war in the building from the lawyers, a big law firm, from the law firm to their nearest tenants above them, which was SPK Records, Clive Davis.
Okay.
And the war was that, back in those days, every one of those offices within SPK Records, actually in Clive Davis's suite and all that stuff, had monitors, and they would listen to cassette tapes of new artists, and every single office had these dual monitors set up, and they would play the music as loud as they possibly can, so the sound would actually travel down through the convectors to the floors below. And the lawyers, of course, were in their conference rooms, in their offices. They wanted peace and quiet, but there was no sound isolation. So who did they call in? John Stork. Who did my client call in? Me.
That's who hired my dad? The law firm?
No, SPK Records.
Okay, so the record company gets like a complaint from the law firm.
Correct.
And they're like, okay, let's hire John. And the law firm hired you.
That's correct.
Okay.
Continue. And when we met, it was, it's 6 degrees of separation. Where are you from? Oh my God. And that's how. And I think it actually goes back even one further to a mutual, because I'm obviously from the same town, or Hudson Valley, we're one town removed.
Where are you from?
Marlboro.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I mean, it's literally, if it's 5 minutes, it's 20 minutes. I mean, it's bordering town that no one's heard of, just like Highland.
That's correct. So so we had a mutual friend. She's deceased today. Her name is Jane Palsick Shunk. She was a real estate agent, broker, who was friends with your mom and dad, and knew me, of course, and said, you guys are, Tony. I think your dad asked her, do you know Tony Pagano? And oh my God, one of those things. And it's been a love fest ever since. So it's and from there, your dad was hired to figure out how to isolate, sound transmission. My job was to carry out his design,
Right.
right? And which was no easy task. So it's because you're in a high-rise building, all steel, nothing, everything touches everything. So sound reverberates everywhere. And
yeah, nobody when they were building it ever thought we would have, a record company vibrating these steel beams or sound go, nobody thinks of that in construction. Obviously now
right,
my dad is brought in a much earlier phase because the technology has, progressed and people are thinking about it in earlier stages of projects. But back in those days, nobody, especially in that kind of building, they were just like, we need a commercial office space. Let's
right,
throw this up. So the easiest way is long steel beams. It's effective. It's cost effective.
steel and deck,
Yeah.
affectionately. So big steel, big Q deck, right? Everything steel and
Yeah.
concrete topping. So
And cement.
maybe a 6-inch layer of concrete. But when you come on the exterior of the building, so the building envelope, obviously they were all interconnected. So how the glass panels connected with the steel on clips, so on and so forth, and how the convectors all backed up to the exterior walls. There's voids, and you'll never, especially back in those days, you never sealed those voids, truly, and it was just ripe for sound transmission, and that particular instance was an absolute war. They were at war with each other. I mean, lawyers obviously on one end, the building owner on another end, and a very powerful, most powerful record executive company on one side, and they kind of hated each other. there was
So
real.
what ended up being the solution? You fill the voids with spray foam?
There was no such thing as spray foam back
Oh,
then. It was
right. No spray
invented.
foam.
So
Okay. Not
it was really insulation and separation. And your father, in his infinite wisdom, as he can only do, sketched up something, right? Your father's like, I think this will probably work, you know, and you got a sketch, and we started to stuff convectors with insulation, and look for any kind of breaches or penetrations along the spandrel. And I think it worked out in the end. I don't
yeah.
think we got it to 100%, but we got it to the point where they stopped warring, and they were able to live their lease uh uh
In
however long it
peace.
was, right, in peace.
Yeah.
In peace. I mean, that was an interesting one, but that's how we met.
So backing up even before that, how do you jump into the world of construction?
So my world of construction starts I go back. We're a very large family. My dad's side was one of 16 kids in Marlborough who emigrated from Italy. All the boys were master stonemasons, actually,
Okay.
master bricklayers, ornamental bricklayers, so on and so forth. Going back even further than that, my grandfather was one of the three that organized labor in New York in the 20s. So there was a labor union that my oldest uncle was running at the time, and who, and I think in 1969, died of a brain tumor. My father was not deployed with the Army Corps of Engineers, but at that point, he was probably with I think he was the superintendent of schools at the Marlborough School District, actually, from an engineering perspective, and felt compelled to have to leave what he really loved to do, and take over the family business, which is what he did. So he ran, at that point, one of the 11 labor locals that New York City had. And this is the Mason tenders, by the way. So these guys are general cleaning laborers by today's standard. Back then, they were actually, today they're non-skilled. Back then, they were skilled. So,
Yeah.
back then, a laborer actually was a plasterer who, actually knew how to mix concrete, who actually, and cleaned up, filled containers and protected, so on and so forth. So I grew up on a small farm on the family homestead. And I think that, kind of all of us when we were old enough, and for me, it was 14, 15 years old, we got a union card and, by school is out June 22nd, by June 23rd, you have a piece of paper in your hand at 4:30 a.m. and you're at the Beacon train station going to Grand Central with an address of a high-rise construction project. And that was me. So I started as a union laborer, right? And it's baptism by fire.
And you were what, 16, you said?
I think I was 15, 14.
15. Yeah. Okay, so you're a freshman in high school.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. And
I mean, that's early. That's early to be going to a high-rise, legit paper on the books construction job.
I remember it was 38th and First Avenue. I'll never forget it. It was a big developer who's still around. If you know I think they're New York sports clubs, not New York sports clubs, but one of the Manichurian family. They were putting up a 40-story condominium.
Okay.
And that's right. That was my first project, as a laborer in New York. And, construction projects, as opposed to today, back then were really dangerous, really dangerous.
Yeah, there's no OSHA.
I mean, guys would get killed. I mean, I saw somebody die every summer, I think, through high school and all the way up. OSHA didn't even respond back then. They would just clean up the mess. The cops would come, the ambulance would come, and, drinking was pervasive. Drugs weren't really a thing, but drinking was. And, guys like me, kids, what do? We become the coffee boy, right? So
right.
That's the first thing that you do. You're a coffee boy. So now, by 8 o'clock in the morning, you're taking a coffee order for your crew. And it's not me, let's say the labor foreman was giving me, pretty much off, you ripped a box in half and wrote down what everybody wanted to eat and drink. Well, if there was one coffee and 20 beers at 8 o'clock in the morning, the Bud Tall boys back then, and even alcohol for that matter, then, and I was the only coffee boy in history that ever lost money. So it was like, I was like, yeah, don't worry. Oh, guys would always tell me as a kid, it's the hustle. They'd always tell me, I'll get you tomorrow. I don't have money on me today. No problem, no problem. I would spend my whole damn check buying these guys their food and drink. And in a lot of cases, even as you get older, if these guys weren't like drunk by 9 o'clock in the morning, they were useless for the rest of the day.
Jeez,
so it was by today's standards, having had that experience to see that, it's eye-opening. It really is eye-opening. And there's I won't get into the ethnicities of who would drink what, but it's guys that were working on steel, for instance, way the hell up, no protection, by the way.
No harnesses, no nothing.
Harnesses, no tie-offs, no nothing. They would
slip, you're just dead. Like 100%. It's over. Yeah,
100%. I mean, these guys would column slide, and if they didn't do it drunk, they just couldn't do it probably. I mean, you get 50 stories, with columns all the way up, and you're framing steel. And if they're off the 50th floor and they wanted to come down to 49, they would just go to the nearest column, grab onto the flange, and slide down the web. Like a ladder.
I mean, I guess you need a little liquid courage to do that. I mean, that's some Spider-Man like superhero stuff. I mean, and even when he films it has wires. So like, 100%. They're just jumping on that. I mean, you got to have a little liquid courage. I couldn't do that. There's no way.
I had no problem walking on that steel back then. I mean, you have a deck. I wasn't walking on a beam. Those guys would walk the beam. I mean, they're steel erectors. But, we're laborers, so I would walk on the deck. And you'd look around and say, today, it's like your head would spin. As you get older, you lose that edge, to want to take risks. And as a kid, it's like, bring it on. The more, the merrier.
But also at the same time, like, do you think there's a little bit of a perspective of at that time, what year is this approximately? When you're 15,
Uh, Probably 76.
Okay, so mid 70s, that's a very different time than today. You
Yep.
know, the
Yeah.
rules are different, building practices are different. Maybe not so much in buildings, you would know more than me, but I don't know if they've changed drastically. There's still a general steel and cement construction. um, but was it, obviously it's a risk, we look back at it now, but was it risky then, or was it just the way it was?
It was the way it was. It was
Yeah,
the norm,
like
right?
that's I guess that's the point I'm trying to make, is like there wasn't even a crew doing it with harnesses. There was just, that was how you built back then,
It was
period.
it. It was
Yeah.
it. I mean, and it just kept going. You know, if you had 3 hours, I can bring you through, chapter and verse of the concrete guys, the steel guys, the tin knockers, drywall contractors, the site guys, guys that are digging, which to me is the most risky part of building in New York City, is
Is the
going down,
digging, right?
going
Because
down.
you don't know what's there.
I mean, today we have ground penetrating radar, and you have borings, you have, geotechs, and all these fancy, young kids coming out of school with their engineering degrees that have all this, today you can kind of pinpoint it. Back then, it was all exploratory surgery,
I mean,
and you were going deep.
Even here in North Carolina, we have what's called 811,
Mm-hmm.
which is this like free service. You call before you start a project. You call before you dig is like their slogan.
It's here too,
And
yeah, same thing here.
for free, they'll, for listeners, like they'll just come out. It's 100% free. They'll send the gas guy, the phone guy, the internet guy. They just mark everything with spray paint that'll wash away in like 2 or 3 weeks. So when you
Right.
dig your footings, you just know you're not at the sewer pipe. No, and
Yep.
that's harder. That didn't exist in the 70s.
Well, that's them protecting their interest, for what they do, like Con Ed in New York, right? They don't want you hitting the gas line. They don't want you hitting, any kind of a penetration into a foundation somewhere that you're taking down a building or you're digging, right? But I'm talking about going on, on our property, our site, our project. And then, you're going down deep. So in New York, you're guaranteed two things. You're guaranteed either a boatload of rock or a boatload of water, one or
Hmm.
the other. It's very rare you're going to hit good bearing soil.
I was
Very
just going to ask what the soil type is like in New
sedimentary,
York.
mostly.
Okay. And is it, I know this might be the wrong words to use, but is it at all natural anymore, or is it all just stuff that's been trucked in, and like the earth that was there, I guess, when Manhattan was like an actual natural lush green island that can't be there anymore?
No, it's not. I mean, there's a lot of fill, but the fill really is relegated, let's say, to the first 12 inches, you
Okay.
know, of your excavation. And what's really cool, I mean, I still find it cool, is it's all glacial.
Okay.
So, and the geologists are always there. And when you're doing cores, when you're down into rock and you're doing cores, you're doing like a 6 foot, 10 foot core of rock, and you're taking out core samples, right? And now they want to see what kind of rock it is that we can fetch on. What can you build a 100-story building on rock that's going to hold it, right? And what kind of piles, what number rebar are you going to sink into that? What kind of grout you're going to sink into that rock? So they want to know it. And the younger they are, the deeper and quicker they can tell you how old that rock is, and when it was formed as a glacial deposit. And it's just the coolest thing in the world. It's like watching National Geographic or Discovery Channel.
It is pretty interesting, especially if you're, in the industry like us, or nerds like us. Like it's just really cool. You get to see those difference in color changes and
Yep.
difference in densities, and to the layman eye it's a rock, but to that person it's literally Earth's story kind of in a core sample. And what's interesting about, at least for me, this conversation especially, is we couldn't be further away from each other. Like, we're in the construction umbrella, but I built single family home residential. You're commercial in New York City. I mean, it's as far separated. I mean, me getting a dumpster is so easy. That's probably the hardest thing in the world is for you to find like street space and get a permit just to put a dumpster. I would imagine it's like
Wow.
such a headache.
It's actually not. Believe
Okay.
it or
Well,
not, it actually isn't. I mean, and you don't need a permit. You just drop it. It's like you make your own in New York anymore. What you do need you have to file for a permit for a construction zone
okay.
building. So, and then, that becomes frozen space for your use. And then
Did
you
you
take,
ever go through the residential world? Because it sounds like at 15 you were doing commercial steel buildings, and why would you ever go back?
I honestly, I'd have a hard time building a house.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. I
Just
mean,
because
I
it's that
understand it
different.
all. I understand it all, but
Yeah.
it's all different product.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's the same machinations in building. Building is building is building. Guys like me, guys like you, and then even add, the layer of the architect, engineering firm, so on and so forth. It's our job to interpretate what they design. It's our job to tell them that it's unbuildable as well. We've been there.
It's
How many
never
times,
unbuildable. It's never
it's of
unbuildable.
course, and take a look at Frank Gehry. It's nothing's unbuildable. It's all curves, right? Until they have a ribbon cutting ceremony and the thing is just raining inside. So it's unbuilt. It looks great. It's got more lawsuits than Carter's got pills. But that's our job. And when you're building residential, don't forget you're also building to, I think, to a higher standard because it's way far more personal, right?
Oh, that's an interesting thought. I never thought of it like that.
Well, I do build residential here in New York. So, where you're building, single story, two-story, single family or multifamily housing, we're building, high-rise condominium, right? And or renovating someone's home. It could
Okay.
be, a 5,000, 10,000 foot house, on the 30th floor of the Sherry Netherland Hotel, right? These guys spend a lot of money doing that. So you would think that, you can build a 10,000 square foot house, which is massive, right? On a site, on 10-acre site, driveway, site work, and, you could probably get it all done. Let's say you're in the Hamptons. You can probably get that all done for, I don't know, $5 million, right? Take that same thing, stick it in Manhattan and in what I just described, right? You're easily 30 million bucks. Easily. So it's
What's logistics like for you? Like, for me, I can load the yard around my foundation with stacks of lumber for my framer to walk very little and just grab and set up sawhorses. And I can have 4 different subs all back up their vans
yep.
with its glory. It's easy. I got a dumpster. I got room for 2 if I need, power poles right there, water, whatever. But if you're working in a high rise, I mean, it's got to, I don't even know. I mean, is there, not every building has a, like a loading dock you can just take over.
Most, well, if the project is big enough and it's a big enough, a Class A office building, let's say, and or a Class A establishment, normally these buildings do have loading docks. But again, you hit it the nail on the head. It's how we plan logistically to move around the site. It's a dance for deliveries.
Yeah.
The deliveries come onto the loading dock at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and you're in line. I can tell you, how certain buildings work that are just iconic, famous structures that maybe your viewers would understand, like Rockefeller Center, for instance. When you're building, we built for NBC there, 30 Rock. We built a ton in there. And just for logistics is the hardest thing in New York City, unless you have a new building. And go back to what I said just previous, that you take out basically a parking lane and or one lane of the street, and you create. You're familiar with the Jersey barriers, right? The
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Today it's a yodock. Back then it was a Jersey barrier. So there were concrete yodocks, that required a crane to place them all. Today, a few guys can handle them, fill them with sand or water, and you're good to go, and you can move them around. And you create your own, your laydown area, right? You create, where guys, maybe, you stick a crane in there if you're building a building. If not, you're just laying down materials that are useful at the time. You could put a job trailer in there, but logistics, and by the way, when you're working, in a building, let's say I could be building 5 floors. Let's say I can be building 100,000 square feet, over 5 floors in a Class A office building for, one of the big corporate users over here. And we're like anybody else. We have to book freight elevator time, right? And if you miss your time, let's say your deliveries are before 8 and after 6, before 8 a.m. and after 6 p.m. So you miss that delivery date, you're screwed for the day. If your tin knockers miss their delivery date for delivering ductwork, right? Your piping guys miss that delivery date, for delivering, any other pipe, anything.
The PVC,
pipe, yeah, anything. You're done for the day. It's brutal.
So you just send those guys home?
There's a fight around every corner. It's there's an old saying we have in the Italian community: you can't make a racehorse out of a donkey. So it's and I always say that I can teach anybody to build a high-rise building if they have common sense. And common sense prevails pretty much in life in general. So it's like common sense tells you that if you miss that time, how much money is this project going to lose for that day? What other trades are you going to impact? That's the domino theory is in play at all times. Let's say any one of those projects has at least 30 to 40 trades on it, right? Everybody has to work in unison. Everybody has to march to a cadence and hit a schedule. We're schedule oriented. It's unfortunate because you think you have all day long, all year long to build, the client wants perfection, right? So, perfection takes time. It takes time to bake that, right? But when you're trying to build 100,000 feet in 16 weeks, think about that. We're driving like nobody's business.
That's
and everybody
very
has
fast.
to step in line. Yeah, it's crazy. We've done it.
That's very, very fast. And is that structure or is that the whole job?
That's an interior. That's
interior. Okay.
Yeah, don't think, any new building going up here, you're no less than 20 months.
So one of those like New York City skyscrapers, steel from ground to finish is 2-3 years.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
At least.
Yeah, depending on the size.
Okay. So like that the one that replaced the World Trade Center, the single tower, like how long does something like that take from start to finish?
That thing was 10 years. I mean,
10 years.
But not because of the complexity of the design, because of the politics that surrounded it.
Actually. Okay, I'm asking, like, let's say you were hired to build that and there was no politics surrounding it. Someone just wanted that tower. How many? 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, these guys go up and down. I mean, you got some pretty cool, big high-rise guys, based out of New York. And all these companies today, I think I worked for all of them as a laborer as a kid. But today they're all owned by foreign means, by foreign concerns. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Every one of them has become public, and it's either a German concern or Chinese concern. They're not owned anymore. And it's what's interesting also is they're American staff, and a lot of guys were my contemporaries, that worked for these firms. Guys that worked for me at some point in my career. And they just don't care. They don't care. They'll do the job, but it's more about how much you want to pay me, because there's no family behind that business anymore. Right. So that thing is offshore. All they care about, all the parent company cares about is please don't lose money. It's a break-even mentality, and and it makes one think: how do you compete against them, right? How do you compete against somebody? It's just like go to war. How do you compete against somebody who's willing to die? right?
It's not a winnable situation.
Not winnable.
Yeah. What's what just to change gears a hair, what is licensing like in the state of New York?
A
Or I guess
very good
more
question.
interesting to me, the city of Manhattan, because I'm sure Manhattan doesn't even care what the rest of the state is doing. They have their own rules and regs.
Well, not really.
No,
Um,
okay, interesting.
the Department of Buildings in New York City is akin to um, the Banana Republic, as far as I'm concerned. You know, I can state that, and I hope somebody picks up the soundbite down at the Department of Buildings and sees me, because they're completely reactive, not proactive at all. Is it a tough job? Yeah, it's a tough job, but they created the mess. And when I say they created the mess, the barrier to entry is so low that anybody and their brother that wants to come in and build a high rise in New York can do that with no track record. No track record. What they need to do is post insurance, right? Have the money to post insurance and get what's called a safety registration number. That's it. That is it. There's
Wait,
no aptitude.
what about a contractor's license?
There's no contractor's license for a commercial building. There's a home improvement license
What?
necessary. Yes.
Sorry,
It's
stop. Stop.
the,
There's
hold
no
on.
license to
No,
be a
no.
contractor?
The license is in the form of a safety registration number.
That's not a
Yeah.
Do
Yes, it's laughable.
you have any idea how hard it was for me to get my license in North
Of course.
Carolina? It was
Of course.
insane. And I got to do continuing ed every year.
Oh, well, you would think, right? You would think. So we have
Whoa.
to. I mean, you know, it's all about everything in New York is in the building department's all about safety.
What
Safety,
about
safety, safety. You
residential?
know,
Is there a residential contractor's license?
when you're working for a homeowner, not building a building. Now you can build a building that's residential, and that still falls under the, you know, you're a builder, right? You're any old contractor. But if you're a home improvement contractor, right, and let's say you're working on the 30th floor of 432 Park Avenue. Look up 432 Park Avenue. It's, you know, one of the most expensive buildings ever, not only designed but built and purchased in New York City, 56th and Park, right? You have to possess a homeowner's improvement license, and that's only there to protect the homeowner from fraud from the contractor.
And how do you get that?
You apply for it, and you get it.
You just like fill out a little
It's
form and pay
absolute
a little
BS.
something.
I mean, it's
Let's say we're in Marlboro. Let's say we're in our hometown, right? And I want to build a new construction, you know, let's just make it, you know, nothing insane, 2,500 square foot, 2-story, you know, I don't need a fire escape. I don't need whatever, just pretty regular as far as, you know, standard. Could I just go do that tomorrow? I don't need a license that's valid in the state of New York. There's no umbrella residential general contractor's license. Like I have a license number with like this plaque like hanging on the wall over here that says like state of North Carolina from like the board with my LLC name and a legit number that I have to put in when I get building permits in the state of North Carolina. They want to see it. And like my plumber has a license. They want to see his number. So do you not need any of those? There's none of that like security check, for lack of a better term. If I want to just build a house, I just need insurance.
I'm not qualified to answer that question as far as what you know, we're up in the Hudson Valley as well. We have to register with the local building department. Like if, you know, for instance, in Ellenville, right, if we're building in Ellenville, you know, the Ellenville building inspector would say, okay, hi. Oh, yeah. Yeah, good. Here's, you know, this is what you need actually for a building permit, right? That's what it's like in the Valley, you know, it could be in Dutchess County, it could be in Ulster County, you know, Rensselaer, Southern Tier, all the way down to, you know, Northern Jersey, Rockland County, and, you know, right abutting New York City.
So as a homeowner, there's no real government entity that you can go to. Like, for example, when I say that, I mean, like when I give my business card to somebody here, it has my license number on it. Right. And they can check that license number with the North Carolina Bureau website and see 0 open cases, or somebody else's license number,
Mhm.
5 lawsuits. There's a record of that, and you could be like, oh, I don't want to hire this guy, he's got
Right.
30 open cases.
Right.
That doesn't exist in New York.
Um, I don't, from a residential perspective, I don't really know. From a commercial perspective, there's a website, I believe it's called DOB Now, New York. I don't think that they post any infractions.
Mm.
What you would see per project is, what they love to do is what's called a stop work order,
Yeah,
right? So, they'll come and issue a stop work order for the most innocuous thing. I think the first fine out of the box is $5,000, and then it just keeps going north from there. And in New York, this is a problem now. Again, being reactive, you see when things happen, in New York City with licensing. Maybe you guys down there saw probably around 3 weeks ago that tower crane that was on fire. Did you guys catch that?
I would be the wrong guy. I don't watch news, so I probably
Okay.
not.
Well,
Yeah.
you should look it up because it's very interesting. I mean, it was, over on by Hudson Yards, over on the west side, the crane, tower crane. So a tower crane is a crane that sits pretty much on a pier, right? That's in sections, and it goes way the hell up. You can go up 100 stories easy, right? And all the way up on top is the operator, who's got, if he looks up, he may see the curvature of the earth.
Yeah,
Right?
to see a plane go by.
Exactly. And and these guys are doing nothing but lifting very heavy things as you're building high. Buckets of concrete, steel, curtain wall, all kinds of things, very, very heavy ordnance. So, the boom, the jib, the cable, all that stuff, this is all big boy toys, right? And somewhere on that machine caught fire in the engine room. This he's kind of got no escape. I mean, he has an escape, but he's kind of got no escape. It's not for the faint at heart. I mean, I always marvel at the guy that would take that job, right? Operating engineers called, and they make a lot of money. But that thing burned and burned in the morning. It was all over the network news. I'm sure people that may listen to this had seen this
Oh,
news.
I'm sure. Like I said, I'm just not the guy, but I'm sure
But,
there's plenty of people.
what happened, it's kind of an anomaly because it normally doesn't go on fire ever. I've never heard of one that burned like that. So, there's a couple of things. So the fire department had to figure out how to put it out. They certainly couldn't get up there. So they were on, adjacent buildings, adjoining buildings with, a 3-inch hose line trying to shoot water over onto the thing, right? Trying to put it out. And things just kept burning and burning and burning till finally the cable spool severed that was actually holding the jib in place, and you're up that high, and then the jib let go, right?
Hmm.
All the way down to the street.
How many stories up is this?
I think there were 45 stories,
So what's an average height of a story?
10 feet.
Okay, so we're 420
You're
feet
way
up in
hell
the,
up there.
yeah, okay. So this is
Maybe
yeah,
even
yeah.
more. But it's and by the way, people were there because this all happened before the fire department, and I think they were all responding at that time. But it was all in real time that cable snapped because it just burned through before anybody can get any water on it, and there were people down below, and it missed everybody. It just
Wow.
missed everybody. It
What
was one of
luck.
the
I mean,
luckiest days.
how do you not cordon, like, get everybody to evacuate at least a block when it starts burning, just by thinking of the fact that it could fall?
Only in this city will people stand right there and watch. So, and not, seek refuge from being destroyed.
Yeah, and I'm sure everyone was filming it on their iPhone.
A million.
Yeah.
A million.
Yeah. Well, that's
No,
that's what people are like now.
Unfortunately, Corbett, there's a lot of that same footage, 9/11.
Oh, yeah, I've seen a lot of
The
it.
same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. People
Seen
actually
quite a bit of it.
filming, the building collapsing on them. So it was but I think what with the building department here, it's they're not proactive in writing or legislating any kind of a change in approach to safety or anything like that. They wait for things like this to happen, then rewrite the code.
Yeah. Well, a lot of listeners, obviously I'm preaching to the choir to you, but a lot of listeners don't actually realize that the code, with my air quotes here, is not a good thing. The code is something bad happened, and this is the bare minimum to make sure something bad doesn't happen. So when the code says, you should frame the wall this, that's the bare minimum. You should not take that as this is the strongest and best way to do it. It's the equivalent of do not eat on that like gel capsule thing when you get a package from Amazon. Somebody ate it once and then they had to put do not eat on it. Like that's what the code is. It's not really this might be a little different with trades, less so building stuff for strength, but for the electrician especially, that's the minimum voltage, the minimum, all about safety, not about best function, not about best operation, just minimum safety. Not always the correct way to do it, just minimum safety. And that's where I think a lot of people are like, I need it to code. It's like, okay, but I would like to do it a little better than code. Why don't we make this deck a little stronger? Why don't we use 2x10s instead of 2x8s? It's just going to be.
I mean, there's a right way, a wrong way, and a competitive way.
Yeah.
Let me just add that flavor. So, I'm not a huge fan of a bid. People want a bid. Remember this, and remember this to anybody who's watching this. You can always find a cheaper number. You can always find, and you always will find a cheaper number, but beware. You're looking for that cheap number from your contractor somewhere along the way. Just go to Vegas, start throwing your money on the crap table because you're in Vegas at that point. You'd rather work with a relationship, somebody who's not going to cut corners. It may cost you a little bit more, but guess what? You're going to get a product that everyone's proud of that's built right. Period.
Yep.
When you're in a competition, you're forcing somebody to get low just to win the project. What do you think they're doing? They're looking for ways to get low. They're actually taking that design. I've been part of it and trying to deconstruct it to make me more competitive and cheaper, right? Or you're going to find alternative ways to make money. You don't want that. You don't want that relationship.
You'd rather have the relationship of somebody who's confident in what they're going to deliver to you and wants to and is proud to stand by it. Because 100%. Guess what? Stuff does happen. But the difference is if I did it correctly and something happens a year from now, I'm going to be happy to go back because I'm almost curious how. Whereas if a contractor knows that they cut some corners, they are counting the days till that 1 year warranty, at least in North Carolina, till that 1 year warranty expires. And on a year and a day, something's going to break. And they're going to be like, well, it's expired. Would you like me to come and give you a bill? Or would you there's a difference of being proud to stand by your name and stand by your product. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I tell clients all the time, the likelihood of me being the cheapest is low. The likelihood of me being the most expensive is also low, but I'm not going to be the cheapest. And then sometimes I have to just ask the client right to their face, what are you looking for? Because like, if you just need like a patch job done because like you're in a bind, we could have a different mindset. But if you're looking for me to do like the quality work that I love to do, there's no discount. It costs what it costs. Like, right. And
God forbid you get paid.
Right. God forbid I made money for the years of knowledge I've been accruing, and even more for you. Twice as many years of knowledge, literally, since you were 15. You've been accruing this information that makes you handle those logistics perfectly in the insane environment of New York City streets.
There's no substitute for for actually, hands-on doing it, right? There's no substitute for, I was a spectator, back then, and I fell in love with the process, and the process has evolved. Technology has entered the fray. I'm the guy that was, and by the way, I didn't just go into my own business. I worked for the big builders. I matriculated into the bigger builders in New York. I was on the Grand Hyatt Hotel as a super. I was on as an assistant. I'm sorry, because it was early, but I was on Trump. Don't say this word too loud in today's environment, but I was a super on Trump Tower way back
It's
then.
okay. He didn't pay to build the building. He just put his name on the front.
I was with the builder. I wasn't with him.
Exactly.
But I remember him coming around. But
do you really? He showed up. I'll be honest. I'm shocked.
The Grand Hyatt Hotel
up.
too. That was the Grand Hyatt Hotel in New York on 42nd Street was his first development. The old Commodore Hotel.
Very shocked that he even showed his face.
Back then, all the time. I don't think he missed a day actually, because he just loved it. If somebody
was he an asshole on site?
I'll refrain.
No, be honest. Be honest.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I wouldn't say an asshole in the way that he treated people. I think that what you see with Trump today, picture that same mentality as a developer back then. He hasn't changed. His persona has not changed. You have to be a New Yorker in the construction trades to appreciate who the hell he is right now. He hasn't changed.
Because at least you saw it. Yeah.
He's his biggest fan. Just ask him.
Oh, we know this. I don't know the man, and I don't plan on knowing him, but I have a feeling. I'm also not a very political person one way or the other, but I'm a fan of stand-up comedy more than anything in life, other than maybe scuba diving. And I'll tell you one thing. Trump for stand-up comedy is gas. It's amazing. What side you're on is irrelevant. There's a lot of content for my favorite stand-up comedians, and that part I love. We'll leave it at that.
It's interesting actually, but he loved to I'm Don, I am the best. And it's your privilege to be on my construction. And we're all, we're all like, the hell is this guy? There's more stories. I swear to God. If you had another 5 hours, I'm going to write a book some point. But they always say that
when you need a sponsor for that book, come to my dad and I. We're in.
Yeah, it's one of the old Italians. To write a good book, you got to name names, and sometimes it doesn't work out well for you.
Yeah, well, just sleeping with the fishes.
Years old, I'm going to write that book.
At 90, I think you're good. All those people should hopefully be gone with you or writing their own book. You could just have a mini series collaboration, all the Italian construction stories.
It's funny.
So,
and the Italians are the minorities right now in the business.
Yeah, I would say the majority of, at least in North Carolina, the majority of people on sites is Hispanic.
Yeah.
It's mostly Hispanic workers. Yeah. And honestly, it's amazing for me because I speak a little bit of Spanish. And as you know, my family, we have a love and go to a lot to Mexico.
Absolutely.
And they are the hardest working people I have ever met. And as tenants, they are the cleanest people I've ever met. And we could get started on the food, but I don't have 5 hours to dissect my love of tacos because that's how long it will take. So for me, it's fantastic. I will say though, I have trouble finding, oddly enough, I don't know why, Hispanics in the HVAC trade. I don't know if that's just like late to the pile, but that's like one thing that at least still here has remained rather Caucasian, for lack of a better term. But there are no white framers. I haven't seen a white framer. They're all Hispanic crews. And, these dudes show up, 10, 12 dudes. And I mean, they will throw a house up so fast. It is shocking. And it's amazing to watch. They'll have two guys cutting full time and have two sets of five on one side and one on the other, and it doesn't look like anything. And then all of a sudden you hear whoop, 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 and they're raising up four walls all at once. And you have it's pretty cool to watch. But
Yeah,
you're not doing a lot of wood framing, right? Because you're mostly
well,
doing metal studs.
upstate.
Right. Okay.
So, up in the Hudson Valley, you're going to see, some, and you do see, some of the 2, 3 story commercial structures, going up with timber.
Really?
There's so many.
See, I thought that was against the rules. I thought you
No.
had to do commercial out of non-combustible materials.
Well, they are non-combustible, and they all have a rating on them.
Well, the
The,
wood is
the
combustible.
timber has a rating. It's combustible, yeah, but non-combustible, anything I think will light up if you put enough flame to it for a long enough period of time.
Oh, I mean, obviously everything will burn. Even steel, you can
Right.
melt. But I mean, obviously the metal stud is going to take longer to burn at a higher temperature than the wood stud.
You would think that, right? And that would your common sense would prevail at that point, right? But 16 gauge, as opposed to 20 gauge, 16 gauge structural stud, which I'm a big fan of, but it slows the process down. Like, I'm a big fan of substituting actual structural steel for structural stud, right? In smaller structures, because to me there's a real cost savings.
Your electrician
And by
loves
the way,
working
there
with
are
metal. I
companies
know
that
that.
you can just feed the framing drawings to one of these companies, and these guys can computer cut your lengths, and
Yeah.
it's almost showing up on the site modular, right?
You do that more now?
No, I'm still trying to shoehorn it into certain, yeah, it's clients and architects and consultants. There's a lot of pushback to this stuff. I'm a huge fan. Are you familiar with CLT, cross laminated timber?
I probably know it as LVL, but
LVLs are
similar.
part of, right?
Yes. Then yes. Yeah.
Predominantly manufactured in Canada. These guys, I mean, you're using, flat plate, LVLs and or laminated timber. It's got a tensile strength of God knows, and it's got a 2.5 hour fire rating, as steel would have for the most part, and it's approved to actually build high rise in New York.
Yeah. And for listeners, this product, to dumb it down, is basically glue and wood chips and in a high pressure mold for just to make it as like simple. There's way more to it, but to simplify it, it's wood chips and glue and resins in a high pressure mold. But what's interesting about it is you can get the span of, the number's irrelevant, but infinitely better than regular dimensional lumber that is from like we took this piece of wood from this piece of tree. And you can also get much longer pieces, but you can still drill it and cut it and paint it like wood. So
that's an LVL.
Yeah, so that's an LVL. Like, for people who have been on my particular website, my massive carport that I built, we had to basically bolt 3 LVLs together to create a 24-foot span. So I didn't have a post in the middle. And it's awesome, but it's they're expensive. Yeah, but you're saying they have the same fire rating as steel?
Well, as CLT, cross laminated timber now.
CLT
so
does.
It's not necessarily medium density or high density fiber board, particle board put together, compacted, da 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 da. These are actual, this is actual strikes of timber that are laminated together, and they're built up. So and as you make it more dense, you're not burning through it anytime quick, and it's actually approved now. So to build in New York City, I actually designed, and unfortunately, I ended up losing a deal at the closing table almost. But I was developing a 10. I always wanted to do one in New York because it really, I'm a real fan of it, and it's raw. So your ceilings when you're done are your ceilings. There's no rock on it. There's no nothing, right? Your columns, I mean, it's really pretty beautiful actually. And it's talk about your carbon footprint. Talk about Just a lot of things. Anybody can look it up. You go to Google and look up cross-laminated timber and take a look at, the buildings that are being built, outside of America, in Sweden, in Toronto. And it's spectacular, just some spectacular, cool stuff. And it arrives basically in modular form, right? So, it's not cheap, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
It's not cheap. So if you're looking for a cheap solution, that's not necessarily it. But it's really something. I think it's the future. I really do. Corporate America has now embraced it. The big designers like Bjarke Ingels, right? And you get these, SOM, any of these big firms that are designing this stuff, have begun designing with CLT, cross laminated timber type products. And it's there's going to be a little bit of noise, so sorry about that. My dogs are going to bark possibly, but it's really, I think it's the wave of the future, without a question. And I think because of the nature of the product, zero carbon footprint type crap, and I shouldn't use that word crap, but it's but as we look at for building efficiencies and things of that nature, I mean, are you familiar with passive house type stuff? Is that across your desk yet?
I mean, the green initiative is very much on the desk, around here.
That's what I was searching for, by the way, the green initiative. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's big around here. I mean, most people are, especially with the humidity in North Carolina, we're rapidly moving away from traditional crawl spaces, where we're going without the vents. We're sealing them completely. The spray foam is really taken over. It's still more expensive, but you when you're me, you calmly do your best to explain that you spend more on spray foam, you spend less on HVAC. It's the same amount of money. You just one more, one less, but it's actually the same amount of money. But people don't people don't comprehend that for some reason. And solar around here, especially. I mean, North Carolina sun is, I don't know if it's abnormal, but it is abundant. And the solar thing is very big here. And I guess just like the overall thought process is just being thought of more and more in the environmental. There's this there's even like an environmental house tour you can take around here, where you can just go, you go I think it's once a year for a weekend to all these homes. They're completely private homes, but they've gotten some sort of star or recognition for being overly environmentally safe. And you can go tour, and see these windows that are this thick, that have these like bolt lockings. They're so airtight. The seal is insane. It feels like a bank vault. But, for a $1,500 single window, it will save you a lot of money on your HVAC bill.
I'm going to venture to guess that they've used what's called passive house technology then to be as efficient from an energy perspective, and from a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning perspective. And when we're done with this podcast, I'll send you something. It just started to come through my Instagram feed. These companies actually, I'll show it to you, and then you'll find it fascinating, because we've been involved in these passive house type things. And to me, it's just like, what are those specific ratings that these guys go for?
Like the Energy Star rating.
No, in big building. I try to put it out of my mind, because they try to be as efficient and account for all kinds of waste, and use products that are low VOC and all this different stuff. I mean, it's just escaped my mind right now, but it's green building basically. And
I had
platinum, platinum rated, or whatever the hell, gold, platinum, whatever the hell it is. And if you're on the building side, and you're actually going to build to that that level of commitment, let's say LEED, LEED certified. So if you're going to build to like a LEED platinum, LEED gold, LEED whatever the hell it is, you know what? Add 10 to 15% to your cost. You
I
know, if
had a
that's what you
client for
want.
the first time ask me, they wanted it's blanking for some reason, but it was like some sort of certification of drywall and paint made with, less chemical
Yeah.
in them. It's probably similar to what you're talking about. They're a couple from California and they're building a house in North Carolina, and she's pregnant. So they were like, we don't want any chemicals in our like drywall, our paint, all this. And so they sent me the certification. I had never heard of it. Luckily, I sent it to my sheetrocker and painter, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I know that thing. It's very expensive." And I was like, "They do not care. I need you to go measure this house and price it with this material." And it was probably twice the price overall. It's shockingly expensive, and I don't know enough about it to know if it's worth it. If it's actually like, does the drywall in my house just been killing me this whole time? Like,
Well,
I feel
it's
okay.
interesting because I was actually an owner of one of those developed paints.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it was developed actually for the U.S. government by I think Virginia Tech, somebody in Virginia
Huh.
Tech, and they sold it to the U.S. government. It had zero VOCs, so it had no smell. Like a lot of people get sick of the paint smell, and it actually is toxic. And if it's crazy. I actually got it specified on several projects here in New York, and I think one was for Christie's, their fine art uh, uh, storage warehouse. You have works of Rembrandt and everything else, and we got that thing spec there, and it worked well. It's not cheap. That's just it. But there's a lobby for companies like Pittsburgh Paints, companies like DuPont. Those guys are heavy lobby guys. They have a lot of money, and if they're going to develop their own product. And if someone else is trying to butt in on their market, like Anheuser Busch, they're going to stamp them out because they can. And that's kind of what happened to this at the end of the day. It was great. I still think it's a great product, and I believe it's still around. But um, it's kind of dead on arrival right now. But
Yeah.
yeah, I understand what you're saying.
So what is, like, as we sit today, what would be your specialty? Like if somebody listening was in the area that you service, I guess that's another question. What's the area that you service? Is it exclusively New York State, New York
Um,
City, and the Hudson Valley?
no, so way back when, um, in order for us to be relevant in the Fortune 100, Fortune 500 world, and the clients that we service, you have to be global. So it's not necessarily just the United States. So the way my I guess approach would always be to New York is the forefront of corporate building, I'd like to say. So this is metropolis, right? So it kind of starts here, and we've had accounts that I can throw it out there now, I guess. Way back when I pitched 100,000 square foot project for Bankers Trust.
Oh, lawsuit. No, I'm just kidding.
You're not even around anymore.
No.
And
Whoever you said I was going to yell lawsuit, I was just waiting. Yeah.
We were the youngest guys in the board table, right? And we're around, and lo and behold, all the facilities people and designers and architects were all women on the other side. And we're these young kids, against these Goliaths in New York construction. And we finished second to one of the more, better known, bigger builders. And they were like, "Oh, we just love you guys," and we're heartbroken. You hear all these stories. He goes, we do have a 50,000 foot other project that we'd love to try you out on. Like 50,000 feet in New York construction, that's a $10 million project, right? Any way you look at it. We're like, okay, and they just negotiated and gave it to us. Well, they liked us so much, we ended up on the road with them in Boston, in LA, in Chicago, wherever the hell it was. And then one day they said, we have, 150,000 feet. This is in the days where they used to do tiered trading floors. So they're trading facilities in London. And I go, I don't have an office in London. Well, one of them looked at me and says, well, you better get there if you want to hang on to us as a national account. And I'm like,
wait, so
oh.
I don't get me wrong. I marvel in the ability that you've done this, but like for me, I got to think about what you just said relative to like how like I couldn't just go to Boston. I have no subs.
Right.
So how do you just go to Boston and do a job? Do you bring a tractor trailer with every sub and tool, or do you just start shopping for sub? I mean, how do you do that?
Part of it's shopping, but 9/10 of it is you have a friend there. There's a friend that's a builder that's from New York, right? You make a phone call.
Even in London,
somebody's going to help you. Oh yeah.
You just lucked out that you knew somebody.
It's always the case. It's always
okay.
The case.
And you just bring them in
10 times out of 10. I guarantee you. So in London, one of my buddies, a New York builder, was building all of Canary Wharf at the time.
Okay.
I made one phone call. I said, this is what I have. This is where I'm coming. He goes, when are you coming? I said, I'll be there next week. He goes, I'll have an office for you and a list of subs. Boom, done. And, off I went. I've never been to London before that, which was crazy. And they have, I relied a lot on a C&I dog, them. Right. And, we kind of grew up in the industry together, and so it worked out.
It's amazing how you just have an immediate response of a 10 out of 10, you effectively calling competition and them immediately realizing there's enough cake for all of us. How can I help, rather than trying to steal that job from the shadows? That part to me is really cool.
They're not going to steal it because they don't have it to steal. Possession is 9/10 of the law.
Well, okay, of course, I'm still just saying, like, it's just heartwarming because there's so many. The lower you get in the totem pole, there's more stories of trying to get that job and this job and not helping each other. And the more you're in the industry, at least for me, I have noticed, the more I'm in the industry, the less competition there is, the more realizing that if we just collaborate, we can all rise equally. There's plenty to go around. So it's just very cool to hear.
You're forgetting one thing, that greed does exist. So
for sure. That's why everybody wants that lowest number, because that lowest number means they got to be greedy and save, some other number.
Corbett, I mean, I think it's like the cutoff was like my generation, my age group. I've seen things that you'll never see, right? But I'm still doing it, right? At that age, right? Your dad, for instance, has seen things that I've never seen, and he's still doing it, right? And you watch the evolution, how it all plays out and how it all works. Now I can pretty much literally go on LinkedIn, find somebody in that location, offer them $150,000 a year to run a project for me, right? And by the way, get me a sub list so that we can vet them out. Technology. So that's just one small advantage of technology, right?
Yeah.
Back then is we had real relationships with real friends.
I mean, we're having a podcast 400 miles apart.
That's correct.
Via technology, and our audio is pretty good.
I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's not bad. We can yell at John Storick if we don't think it's perfect. He supplied the microphone. No, he'll care. He supplied the microphone.
Oh. It's and even digging deeper, your dad's friends have become my friends, right? Of his generation. So guys that obviously we lost Bobby Kaminsky recently.
Yeah.
He became a friend. I wouldn't know him from, I met him down at Electric Lady Studios with, your pop and Joe Schick and the rest of those guys, and the stories. I marvel at these stories, the best stories. That's why I said anybody who's watching this, and loves rock and roll and music and smart people, John Stork is your guy. He's your guy. He is. He can keep you amused all day long. I just love it.
It's true.
Don't ask him.
I tell some people what my parents do, and they're just like, "Oh, cool, architects. That sounds
Yeah,
cool." And I'm like, "Well,
I like that.
yeah, but they kind of design recording studios." And they're like, "I don't really know what that means." And I'm like, "Well, everybody you listen to, or half of everyone you listen to, has recorded their stuff in a room my dad designed." And then you see the face, they're like confused. And then I start rattling names off, like a famous artist. And it's just like, at first they don't believe me. And I'm like, here, why don't you just go to this website that
Right.
shows the names? Like it's real. Yeah.
It's crazy.
So, and then it makes sense because my life has been a lot about networking recently. I really like dove into it and meeting all of these realtors. And they're like, oh, so how do you're designing rental properties? And I'm like, well, my mom's the designer. And they're like, oh, okay. And my dad's the architect. They're like, oh, dream team. I'm like, you have no idea. Like we were bred to do this. It's like in the
Yeah,
blood from day one. But I mean, just like you, I mean, you grew up doing it.
that's correct.
Literally, it's in your blood. It's the same thing. You
Yep,
just took a different path.
that's correct.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. I fell in love with it. It's just like, your mom and your dad, work well together. And, it didn't happen overnight, for them either. So, they had to chip away and chip away at it. Right here where I'm sitting right now, I'm in Union Square. I can look and see where your mom and dad lived, forever and a day, right from my window right here. I'm looking right at it.
This is pre me.
Yeah, for you, way for you.
Yeah. Well,
So, I mean, I
not
remember
that
going up
much
there to
pre
meet
me. Yeah, there wasn't that much time pre me.
him.
If you do the math there. Yeah. So I'm looking at your cool background here.
Yeah,
Founders pretty clear. What's MGI stand for?
Marlboro Group International.
Okay, Marlboro Group International. And
MGI.
so if somebody wants to hire you, you can take them from like the absolute start of I don't even have a design. You can be a
Yeah,
design team, a draftsman team, go from nothing to design to plans to colors to the final product.
in less than 50% of the time would we engage in what's called design build, right?
Okay,
For what
less than
we-
50%. Okay.
So, like, right now, your dad and I are actually on a project where it's a design build type scenario. It's actually for the Dutchess County SPCA,
Oh yeah, he's mentioned this a
right?
few times. Yeah.
So, it's a collaboration of builder, designer, fast track type construction, and
Right.
I'm a big dog rescuer, so it's
Yeah, I mean, you're that part of your life floods my Instagram more than anything
that's
else.
correct.
It's like I feel like every 4 days you're at JFK and there's like 70 dogs you're rescuing,
That's
and I'm
right.
just like, where do you put them all?
That's correct. Well, I certainly don't have them up there on the store compound.
Well, maybe one day we have the
Maybe one
acreage.
day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you come across an adorable pug, I'm sure my sister-in-law would take it off your hands. So you can just
Well,
shoot
there's a
it to
lot.
Emma.
We rescue out of the ones that you see. We rescue out of China. So these are the slaughterhouse dogs.
Oh wow, that's dark, but thank you for rescuing them.
It's very dark because these dogs are stolen, sold for dog meat, and abused and tortured. So, and by the way, we have a lot of pugs.
Okay.
Pretty
So
nuts.
did you create a rescue or do you just volunteer with one?
No, it's I have my own rescue, right? Where
Okay.
I let's say matriculated helping others out of Puerto Rico, then I got good at it. Then I
Okay.
started to do it myself. But in that process, I ran across a rescuer that's from New York. His name is Jeff Berry, No Dogs Left Behind, who actually was an engineer, a design engineer for David Yurman. David Yurman, the big jewelry scion of whatever the hell it was, and he designed, for him, and would always be in China. And would, as a fellow dog lover, saw, stumbled upon the dog meat trade there, and the number one dog that the culture that actually engages in that likes to eat is a golden retriever.
Mm.
give you an instance. So, and
They're so smart. That's insane.
it's the problems that surround that. So, it's not as much as it's stolen out of the backyard and immediately sold to a butcher, for a shekel, whatever the hell it is. It's they believe in the slow torture of the animal, that the fear endorphins that are released during torture makes the meat more tender.
Oh,
So it's the best thing that can happen to these animals is they kill it. That's the best thing that can happen to it. But it's a torturous, slow death for them, and it's every damn dog. You pick it from Siberian Huskies to Chihuahuas to, of course, these Goldens and Labs and everything else, and the beautiful Chinese rural dogs that are out there. It's and I mean, we got together. That's what it was, and I started to run his rescue.
So for listeners, what's the name again of the rescue?
That one, the Global No Dogs Left Behind.
And yours is called
Animal Rescue Consortium.
Okay.
Just
and
like
I'm
that.
assuming
Animal Rescue Consortium.
Okay. And I'm assuming everybody listeners can, Facebook, Instagram, or website.
I use nothing but Instagram.
Okay.
For me, when I'm rescuing litters, feral. And by the way, all the dogs on Puerto Rico are all feral, for the most part. So there's 600,000 stray on the island. Last
600,000 in Puerto Rico.
Yeah,
that's a lot of dogs.
A lot of dogs. Puerto Rico's not really small, but
that still seems like a very large amount of dogs. I guess Puerto Rico's. How many square miles is Puerto Rico?
I don't even know.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm not going to Google it right now.
You count it by hours.
You count it by hours?
3 or 4, maybe 4 hours to get around, from one side to the other, from east to west or west to east.
Well, it takes 4 hours to get from one side of Manhattan to the other, but that's not a good measurement.
That's just getting out of Manhattan on a good day. What are you talking about? That's so it's on a good day. And it's gotten more brutal.
So, okay, also for listeners, I guess, the Marlboro, Manhattan, or global, how do people find MGI?
MGINTL.com.
Okay.
MGINTL.com. It's we're really for probably the first time in my career beginning to look at the Hudson Valley as the headquarters now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. It's exploded that much.
Yeah. It's not just exploded. I mean, it's competing in New York City. It's just not the same. It's just not the same. And, the pandemic actually pushed a lot of people from New York north.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of them settled up in the Hudson Valley.
Yep.
Corporate America found it. Certainly the hospitality industry found it. Certainly these are all the sectors that we build. Hospitality, healthcare, thanks to your dad, multimedia, soundstage. And soundstage, we just finished a project up in Saugerties, right, for Upriver Studios that your dad actually put us on. He taught me and everyone else in my organization, acoustical building and the acoustical building, the principles of acoustical building.
Yeah. He likes to say all the time that he'll meet a builder who is not a studio builder. And then after one job, now they're a studio builder.
That's right.
That's just what you got to follow the plan. Once you follow the plan and build a studio, now you're a studio builder.
Well, you're kind of following the plan, but you're also being indoctrinated and understanding those materials, IAC doors. For instance, IAC doors, right?
Yeah.
The staples that are in all studios for the most part.
Yeah, those many layers of drywall and plywood.
And it's again the same building component or materials, but exactly how it comes together, right? The principles of acoustical building, kinetics flooring, things of that nature. What separation means,
yeah.
Right? What it means to if a room doesn't work, we're all up Schitt's Creek, right? Think about it. There's high stakes in building recording studios, for instance, right?
Yeah, they're also very expensive projects. So mistakes are just compoundingly more expensive to fix. The components, the finished components that then have to be removed to get to the problem sometimes can't be reused, which means they've got to be reordered. And I mean, if you screwed that up, you're paying for it. That sucks. And that can be a real, that can really screw you.
One IAC door, one studio door, for God's sakes, is $10,000.
Yeah. It's just,
Again, that's a small door.
That's one single
Yeah.
regular 36-inch door by 7 foot.
Not installed. That's
So
just
I tell you a funny story, right? So this studio doors, they're for the most part, if not always, they're 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
So, but residential doors are 6'8".
Right.
So for one time, Pops had his firm doing one of these plans for one of these residential homes we're doing down in North Carolina. And they're doing exactly what they're told, right? The draftsman just hits copy and paste of a door schedule from an existing plan into this plan. And they all say 7 foot tall. And nobody catches it. I send this to Talbert's Lumber Supply. They order me 7 foot tall doors. They send me a confirmation page. Yeah, these widths all look good. I don't even think about it, right? Because everything's just, it's a standard door as far as I'm concerned. These doors show up. They're coming off the truck, 7 foot and 6'8". When you're buying a door that's in the jam with the frame around it, all one piece, with the wood screwed onto the bottom just to ship it, they don't really look different. And we're loading them into the house. Okay. The next day, I'm hiring a laborer to help me to install them. We pop this thing off. We take the trim off, right? We go to put this thing in. Boom. I mean, it's this big. It's the size of my head. Right. And we're looking at each other like, what in the hell? Did they frame these openings too low? We're getting tape measure. Right. We're like, no, it's regular. Okay, so what do? Let's cut the frame of the door. Oh. All the doors are hollow core. Right. So for those who don't know what that means, for listeners, you obviously do, but for listeners, that means just the very edge and the very minimal amount of structural things are solid and everything else is just hollow and it's covered with plywood on each side.
They're called the rails.
Yeah, they're very, very light and they're good for just a visual barrier. Great for a closet where noise is irrelevant. Not good for a bathroom, let's say. So you can't cut them because there's nothing to screw the piece you cut off into and it'll just collapse on itself. So literally we had to take all these doors. I had to store them in my garage for a year. I had to order new doors. And 3 months ago, we rented the house that we then put these doors in. And I made a red note on every page of the plan that said headers 7 foot, headers 7 foot, headers for my framer, so that we wouldn't have to keep these freaking doors anymore.
But guess what? You learned an expensive lesson, but you learned a lesson.
Yeah, well, luckily it ended up being kind of free because I own a garage and I was able to hold the doors and reuse the doors, but it could have been a very, very expensive lesson because we tried to sell the doors at one point with no luck, even at a huge discount. And it was looking pretty bad at one point. And then we just decided.
One of the stories that come to mind for a case, we've all been, by the way, involved in things like you just described. But, way back, even today, there's the drop-down screens for projection screens. There's one company that makes most of them. It's called Daylight, DA-LITE, right? So what you get in these boardrooms, you get the screen, you get the screen spec, but a lot of people, it comes in a box. It comes in a plywood, enclosure. And inside that plywood, and you're fastening that plywood box in the ceiling, right? So, and the screen drops down from that box. Those who don't know what they're doing, right, and are going to learn a very expensive lesson. So let's say you sell it to the carpenter actually fastens the box in there. That screen doesn't drop down until occupancy and someone's going to use the room, right? Now, the screen, let's say, has to be centered to the conference room table, right? If you're in a big conference center or whatever it is. Well, guess what? Inside that box, the screen is actually off to one side or the other. It's not dead center on the box, right? So when you learn this lesson,
it comes out 8 inches to the right.
That is correct. And you're like, whoa. Right. So, when you're young and you do this and you make that mistake, now you just learn an expensive lesson.
Yeah. And you
Right.
know
And then
what's funny even more is when we walked through the second house that we used the 7-foot doors in with my mother and father, and it's like it's at punch list, or even half the punch list has even been complete. We're walking through and we look at each other and we're going, we should put 7-foot doors in every house. This is nicer. And we were like, well, we could do that. They weren't really that much more expensive.
Yep.
Because we didn't even notice the price difference when we ordered a residential home door package. It was almost the same price. So we were like, well, maybe that's our new trademark: 7-foot residential doors and
Well,
orange front door. I'm sure you've noticed that. We have the orange front door.
I'm still lobbying your father to do modular recording studios. And if he watches this, what he probably will, I keep saying, studios by Stork. Right.
Studios by Stork. They fly in.
We did one. I did one for him for Mad Money. Remember Mad Money, Jim Cramer?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we did a modular for him that, he called me. I said, Anthony, we got to do this project. It's for Jim Cramer, Mad Money, on MSNBC or wherever the hell he was on. And it was like a modular studio within an office building. It was a temporary studio until his real studio actually came up. And it was so cool. I said, you know what? You should brand these, John. Brand them. I said,
I
people
think
know
you
who
could do
you
it
are.
on inside a really small shipping container that could then
Yeah,
just
that's
be
what I'm
popped on a
saying.
truck, and almost like picking up and unloading a dumpster, but it's a studio.
It's
Yeah.
pretty like a VO room type, a podcast room.
Yeah. A podcast room, or just, one instrument or a vocalist at a time could go in there and do something. You could do speaking, you could play. I mean, it would be probably harder to do, say, drums, but easy to do a guitar, a bass, a vocal track. Yeah, absolutely. I
The
mean,
John Stork signature series. So it's should do it.
I like this idea. I know
Tell him.
somebody that we could work on this together. Just saying.
You tell him because he's like, Anthony, I'm getting too old. No,
Oh,
you're not.
please. Yeah, okay. Tell that to the amount of hours he works.
I
Yeah.
keep saying that. If he keeps calling me at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to shoot him.
Uh, you turn your phone on silent. I don't know what to tell you. I learned to program my iPhone to not let rings through till 8 a.m. and then to stop letting rings through at 10 p.m. because I'm just like, I don't want to be disturbed. It's Corbett's time, sleepy time. Okay, so before we wrap up, what's your website again?
mgintl.com.
Okay, and
That's it. So it's
that's it.
we're now I just formed an alliance out of Europe now. So now we cover Italy, France, Germany. Again, not necessarily to compete in those marketplaces, but really to service our long-standing relationships based out of New York globally. Right.
So it's the design, if I understand that correctly, was you have great clients and their business is taking them to other places. So you want to be able to service them because they already have a great trusted relationship with you.
Yeah, it's really another contractor that we cross-pollinated and formed a joint venture in Europe
Right.
that way, and it allows us to go a lot deeper and a lot harder. It's they'll send again, it's we'll hold a sales summit, let's say, right, and we'll compare notes, and you'd be surprised how many of the same client we're working for in Australia too, by the way. So we're in Australia as well.
Oh, very cool.
How many of the same clients we're working for clear across the globe. It's just nuts, right? Especially in the financial sector.
What's your day-to-day look like?
My day-to-day is, although I founded the company, we're a women's business enterprise as well. So my sister Susan actually is the president of the firm. And we key in on diversity, right? And really advocating for women in construction. So and that was born pretty much out of the crash, the financial crash of 07 or 08, 09.
Okay.
I had a 60-story hotel going up that I was developing. Um, that didn't finish well because Lehman Brothers was my lender. It was a bad time for me in my history of this business as a developer. It was a hotel, actually, a 60-story hotel, and residence, a big site. And what happened at that time, Bear Stearns had just gone down, failed. Lehman Brothers, which was our lender, failed with our money. There was kind of no way back into a black hole, and we were about, I'm going to say, $15 million through a foundation program already. So we were down deep. I think I had 450, 110-foot deep piles in the ground. Just to give you an idea, dewatering, we were on water like nobody's business. When you're building like that in New York City, you're building most times between building. That was a big site, but you're building between buildings. And when you dewater a site, because you're excavating down deep, you're keeping strict mind or focus on, erosion and eroding the foundations that are adjacent to you. Because the next thing you know, you'll make the evening news of a building collapse. Right? And that's what you're always afraid of. In any case, what happened at that same time also was non-unionism came into New York. Right, you had the financial collapse. The debt markets were frozen over here. You had a complete financial collapse. Unprecedented, or since 1929 or whatever the hell it was. It was they called it a super recession. For me, it was a depression, and it's still a depression, but it's it was our generation's depression, and non-unionism was born out of it because corporate America had enough, spending, let's say 2x on hiring union labor. When now a lot of Latino type craftsmen were here. And they were willing to do things cheaper, a lot cheaper. And I'm talking about 20, 30, 40% cheaper. You just couldn't get these guys into Class A office buildings with the big owners. They wouldn't allow it. But at a point, they came around to it. And when they said go, you went. The unions had a big problem. That was kind of the collapse of the skilled labor unions. The carpenters, steam fitters, tin knockers. It just went down. And, we have a saying, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. They never evolved. And they pretty much, they're still here, but they got pounded out. Now, New York is primarily open shop, which means, union and non-union work harmoniously together on the same project.
It seems so crazy that they had worked together on the same project.
Yeah, well, guess what? I had to go, just to stay alive. We had to figure out how to build things non-union, just to stay alive. We can still build union, but we can now legally build non-union. Let's say. So, and it's an interesting time. And again, that whole thing is still unwinding. Still, after all these years. But my sister actually climbed to the top of. I had to figure out how to make that whole thing happen because clients wanted this thing non-union. They didn't give a damn. She said, she was on the development side, Marlboro Equities, actually. That's our development arm. And I said, guess what? You're now in the construction business. And she goes, well, then I want to achieve our WBE, a national WBE, Women's Business Enterprise certification. I said, have at it. And she's a real proponent of women in building, and how far that it's kind of tough to watch because it's kind of demolition in slow motion, but it's after all these years, and I'm talking 15 years now. So after all these years, it's slowly coming around, and I'm a firm believer that women do get things done better. I've seen it. There's a lot less acrimony when a woman is on the project management side. I think they're far more focused. There's a lot less bravado, right? It's guys like me have to deal on the white collar side and on the blue collar side. right? When you're dealing with a tradesman, you know, today, if there's a woman, project manager and a steam fitter will yell over, "Hey, Toots, I need your help here." She might, you know, either sue him or hit him, one or the other. I'm not sure, but there's kind of zero tolerance now for the women professional because they cut through the bullshit and get it done. Actually, where it's the other way around that we were used to. It, like I used to say, Corbett, it was very rare we'd get through one project without a fist fight on the job. Very rare.
Yeah, that does not, there is no fighting on my jobs. That's not a thing. Yeah.
Imagine having that much testosterone, right? And I keep telling you, we're in the domino theory, right? One guy falls down, and then he's giving you a BS excuse for the most part that we know is not true, and it's affecting everybody's bottom line and our reputation. Tempers do flare.
Yeah,
that's good.
I've definitely seen the difference in finished work when it's a female versus a male, especially in the drywall profession.
Yeah.
Like my drywaller, I love him and he does amazing work. But a lot of times I'll just be like, hey, go do that. And I'm not there to like watch who's hanging, who's taping, who's mudding, who's priming, who's painting. He'll just tell me the drywall's done, the primer's done, the paint's up, the caulk's done. I'll let me know when the trim is in and I'll go back and take a look because he's painter and sheetrocker. Well, but then one time I went by just to say hi, and it was like, I think there were actually only females doing all of the finish work, all of the mudding, the really delicate caulking, and it just like it was like, it was almost like a duh that like his rough, guys were the ones who were hauling and cutting and screwing the sheetrock, and then they screw off and go to the next hanging job, and the females come in and do the immaculate touch-up work because the attention to detail is just so much higher. And that profession was definitely male dominated 50 years ago or even 20 years ago.
The lost art.
Yeah.
These are artisans, by the way. What you're describing is and by the way, someone who takes pride in their work.
Yeah.
Who doesn't see it as a paycheck. So, and that too is a lost art.
Yeah.
Someone who takes pride. The American craftsman, right?
Well, the American craftsman is not getting paid enough to. The American craftsman with non-unions today is not getting paid enough to live an acceptable life and be proud of their work. It's not, you're expecting them to live this acceptable life and be proud of their work and get, roughly half what they should probably be making. And it's like, well, why? Well, how could you expect all three? Like, it's not, do you want it good? Do you want it fast? Do you want it cheap? Pick two. You get two. That's the saying. That's the saying that Pop always told me. Is like, if you're trying to close somebody, tell them pick two of the three, and then you won't get the third one. Whichever way do you want to go, and it does work sometimes. No. The lessons from John Storick on this episode of the Orange Hammer podcast. Yeah, we could probably do a whole. I was going to say, we could probably do a whole episode on just John Storick isms. And I think the best one is you can't shower with a grouper.
Oh.
That's definitely the best one.
I've actually heard that one.
Yeah, because we all looked at him when he said that, and he looked back with this face like, the hair for sure. He looked back at this face like we were the idiots. And after a 2-second pause, he just went, "What?" It would just flop all over you. And you're like, well, that is in fact a factual statement. Yeah, can't shower with a grouper by John Storick. It would just flop all over you. Well, I don't know if there's a better place to leave it than right there. Tony, this was awesome. I know we've been bouncing around trying to do this for a while. Yeah. I don't like doing them on Zoom, but you definitely make it easier. For listeners, again, the Orange Hammer, we're on Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Corb at WSTG.com, 845-489-6057 if you're in the triangle and need some work or want to come on the podcast. And yeah, Tony, I just want to really thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Well, there's no thanks necessary. I've been your biggest fan since I saw you running around your front lawn naked when I was for your listeners, by the way.
There you go.
What the hell's with these kids? These hippie kids. What is this?
Believe it or not, I was smaller once upon a time.
We all were. But I just want to say that you know what? I've known you since you were that small. I'm damn proud of you.
I really appreciate it, and your help has been instrumental, especially when we needed the help with those contracts a couple of years ago. And yeah, I just many thanks, and let's do another episode.
Don't thank me. I can't wait to do the next one. So I'm psyched that I did this one finally after talking about it.
Awesome. Well, we'll set up another one. Absolutely. And yeah, bye everybody. And thanks, Tony. I appreciate it.
We'll see you. Good luck. Cheers.
Thanks. You too.